I'll send you more details after I get more information. I will spend this week keeping an eye on things. I suggest you get some rest, he said. After a few moments, they got up from the table. Well, I'm going to take a nap. Then we can go to train Redfield, Parker said, walking towards the door, until he stopped and turned around. You could come too, Ghost. It will be good to learn a few things from you. Ghost turned slightly, looking at him out of the corner of his eye. We'll see, was all he said, before Parker shrugged and left the room. You should go back to the infirmary. Come on, I'll walk you, Jill said, watching Chris get up. I'm fine, Jill, Chris said after a little irritated, tired of being in that place. No, you're not, and you will stay here when Claire wakes up. It will comfort her, she said, and they both walked towards the door. Ghost sighed and put a hand on his waist, going back to staring at Hunk's mission on screen. At the moment, he seemed to be walking through the corridors of the laboratory. There were a few infected, lying on the floor, with a grenade-like object in his hand, immigrating greenish smoke. Good to know that the smoke had worked, and more infected could retract when the more he got close, which made it easy for him to eliminate them. What are you still doing here, Sherry? He asked. Without looking at her, the girl was still sitting there in the same chair as before. When did you decide to become a soldier? To fight bioterrorism? He asked, and Ghost just looked at her with an arched eyebrow. She had her hand resting on her arm and was looking at him with a neutral expression. However, her eyes were shining. Something was up. Why do you want to know? He deflected the question, as Sherry snorted in a nasal laugh. Nothing, just wondering. You're so skilled and smart. I wonder if you could change a few disastrous incidents, Sherry said, looking away from the screen, watching Hunk dodge the blow from what looked like a hunter. The place was too dark for them, and the camera had yet turned on the night vision. Were the incidents, outbreaks in the 80s, 90s, and even some recorded in the late 70s. Of course, you didn't exist. If you had, maybe Raccoon City wouldn't have suffered such an end. And you were created because of that? She asked, standing up and taking a few steps closer to Ghost, then crossing her arms and stared into his eyes. Our organization was created in the early 90s before that. William was gathering around enough power. I was created a few years later. Raccoon City wasn't something we could interfere with. We didn't have a high enough power. That was all he said, feeling a strange sensation in his chest, and he didn't like it. He felt like something he hadn't felt with any of the bioweapon. He was beginning to feel pressured, and that worried him. Somehow, I don't believe you, she said, and Ghost swallowed some saliva. It was amazing how he could feel so surrendered, so pressured with a girl who was less than half his size. Believe what you want, Redfield, he said, looking away, his tone strictly professional, which made Sherry cluck her tongue. How much do you plan to keep this up? She asked, and she sighed. Received no reaction. Take off the mask. I'm afraid I can't do that, he said, still not looking at her. However, his heart was pounding in his chest, his muscles tense in nervousness as he was trying to concentrate on the computer screen. I know who you are. The words made him hold his breath, without even realizing it. His throat seemed to close up. He tried not to react, but Sherry certainly noticed his chest rising and falling with certain frenzy. No, there was a way she could find out. It didn't make sense. He never took off his mask. His voice had never changed, and he didn't even mention anything about his past. However, his eyes soon widened slightly as he remembered the moment he saw her in that warehouse. A few moments he tended to his wound, and he had appeared. It was at that moment where she had changed. Ghost swallowed some saliva again. She saw the scars. Look at me, she tried again, but he ignored her. She saw scars, but if that was the case, then surely she knew who he was, and he helped to get some wounds and get some touch with more scars more than once. A man as strong as afraid to face a little girl? Pathetic, and you know it, she scolded again. But yet Ghost refused to face her. It couldn't be. After so many years, his training had turned him into a machine, and it was the way he should stay. He hadn't trained so hard. He hadn't gone through all that just to give his dead identity revived. He couldn't let it. Look at me, Leon, she shouted, and he closed his eyes. But of course she knew who he was. He had been careless. Just made a slip. Nah, Sherry was smart. She always was. She would have been thinking twice about being cautious around her. With short breaths and a closed throat, he looked at her with his blue eyes meeting hers. The girl's mouth was slightly trembling, and she was emotional. "Take off your mask, please." Her request sounded more like a plea, reaching for Ghost's cold heart, which for the first time in a long time, he felt a sensation of warmth. His human side took over, his side so battered, so beaten and down, bruised under 7 feet, rose from the ground like a damned zombie in the graveyard, and without thinking too much, without listening to the agent's side, he took off his mask. For the first time in a long time, he let himself feel exposed.